Welcome to Venture Step Podcast, where we discuss entrepreneurship, industry trends, and the occasional book review. Shell companies, hidden owners, and a web of financial secrecy. Sounds like a spy novel or some kind of movie, right? Nope, it's reality. Today, we're going to be discussing the BOI filing that is pending to be required to file January 1st next year. The reason why I say pending is it is up in the air and TBD, depending on the appeal of the Department of Justice in response to some of the rulings from court cases from various states. That being said, the BOI filing is related to what is called the Corporate Transparency Act, or CTA. So I'll be saying CTA and BOI pretty often, and I'm not sure if I recall correctly, but BOI is the Beneficial Ownership Information Filing. What we'll be discussing in the episode is TD's recent money laundering scandal, the legal cases and their rulings so far, how this potentially would affect your business, and I was going to show you how to file, and I was going to do my own filing because the two LLCs, and the website is seeming to be down for the form to fill out, because you would fill it out on the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network website, and it's like fsin.gov/BOI FinCert. Yeah. And so you would go there, and it's right on their homepage. You just go BOI and you click on it, and then it's like how to file. You click on that, and there's a form that you fill out, and that's it. It's really easy. But I was going to show you how to do that. Maybe they have the link down either because it's the government and they don't have proper maintenance put up. But when I clicked the link, it seemed like it was sending me to their test environment. And it probably doesn't let me use the test environment because I don't have test environment credentials. Or they thought that it was easiest. So when they win the appeal or something happens, they could just switch it to prod. I don't know. But I would like to caveat this episode with, I'm not a lawyer, nor am I an accountant. If you are seeking legal or financial advice, please do so with someone that is a professional and has the licenses in the areas that you're doing business. Okay, before we dive in, I'm your host, Dalton Anderson. My background is a bit of a mix of programming, data science, and insurance. Offline, you can find me running my side business, or lost in a good buck. You can listen to the podcast in both video and audio on YouTube. If audio is more your thing, you can find the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcasts. TD's money laundering recently came out October 2024. Such a crazy case. $3 billion in fees, which it's not really a fee, it's more a penalty, but fees to the government, same thing. So $1.8 billion to the Department of Justice, that which might fund the appeal for the Corporate Transparency Act. I don't know. And then $1.3 billion to the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, right? So just throwing it out there. So the Department of Justice is going to be appealing Texas's ruling on the BOI filing, and also is part of this TD piece. And the FinCert is the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, is the same place you would file your BOI filing. Crazy stuff, though. So close to, $3 billion. I don't know if it's been completely finalized, but they're getting fleeced for sure for what they're doing here. What they did, I think, is respectable. Like, you should be getting paid. You should be paying out billions, but TD's pretty big. Like, they're not a small bank. They're top 10 in the United States under assets under management. And I think one of the things that they had to agree to is capping their growth to like 438 billion or something like that. I have it down below, so I could correct myself later in the episode. I don't know. I mean, 3 billion is a lot, but is that enough? Right? Like the more I read about it, the more I felt that it was just gross negligence on the executives, management, culture, infrastructure, system processes, like just crazy stuff. One of the things that I pulled out from an article and I highlighted was that retail employees, they didn't formally define what a retail employee was, but I'm pretty sure what they mean by that is it a employee that works at the bank on the retail side. They flagged Many employees flagged transactions over $100 million moving in and out, illicit transactions. And TD Bank didn't do anything until the law enforcement or FBI or whoever, whatever agency was involved was like, hey, like these are illegal transactions. You need to take action on them. Freeze the accounts. 100 million is a lot. Like if you flagged 100 million, there's just no way that TD didn't know. Right? Like if you pull out more than $5,000, you've got to say what you're doing it for. Oh, I'm buying a car or I'm doing this. And they write down the reason. And you're saying that the bank had no idea that there was just transactions flowing in at 100 million at a time or something. Like that's crazy. And then the employees were even joking about it on like it was an open joke where it was like, hey, like, oh, we're complicit in money laundering and just like the company's okay with it. And when your employees start openly joking about it, that's how you know it's just so bad that it's not even a secret anymore. Where it's like, oh, like hey, we do money laundering. It's not in our explicit company benefits for your when you're an account holder with us. But I'm sure that if you need to use us for these illicit activities, it's fine. I mean, we have people moving hundreds of millions of dollars. No problem. So if you need to move the money, just come to TD. We would service your account and we wouldn't say anything. I mean, what a great sales pitch that is. And if they're moving 100 million, they're not getting any service fees for that. There's no low minimum balance or any of those things where they could charge you $25 a month. So I don't know. But so they're fined a couple billion. They have to do a whole bunch of stuff. So they've agreed to having 3 years third party audit. So if they retain an audit team to audit the company, they had to hire 700 new employees to help with this anti-fraud stuff. They had to put in a new procedures and decision-making process. It seems pretty reasonable. And then they had to use data-driven mitigation technologies. Maybe they didn't have that. It's just some of the stuff that they're talking about. I'm like, okay, you're a company that's managing hundreds of billions of dollars. You don't have anything sophisticated. I mean, data-driven risk mitigation technologies is not something that's too complicated. Okay, this transaction seemingly comes out of nowhere. Oh, okay, here's another one that comes out of nowhere. All right, and then they're pulling money in and out fast. Okay, it seems weird. Normal people don't do that. And you have so much transaction flow throughout the whole bank and all your accounts that you hold. It should be pretty easy to pull the data and understand what is normal and what's outside of normal. And like if you're so many deviations outside of what normal is, then then it automatically flags the account. And if you're like, oh, like X deviations out, like not like crazy deviation, but enough to where it's quite unusual, flag it for review. I don't know. So they're having that going on, and then the weird thing is they also had to agree to, and this is what I feel like is the worst thing that they had to agree to, is a 434 billion cap on assets. So they are completely limiting their growth in the US. And from my understanding, it was a limitation until they got everything squared away. So it's like 3 years where they have to do that and they can't grow. So they have to get approval to grow, or 3 years. So it was like a weird option thing where if they grow enough, or no, sorry, they can't grow, but if they improve their processes enough, then they can get sign off, or it's after the audit team is like, yeah, like we don't need to audit them anymore. So crazy stuff. I don't know how these things happen. And it's kind of similar to Wells Fargo. Like, how do these banks do these things and be like, oh, I didn't know. I had no idea. Sorry. No idea that I did that to you. It's just hard for me to understand. I bank with Capital One, and I flew to Japan and Korea, as you talked about in previous episodes. And every time I flew there, originally when I go to Japan or I go to Korea, they would do a dual factor requirement on my account for like a day and a half. And then at one time, I typed in my password wrong. So I tried to do my fingerprint sensor, and my finger was at a weird angle and it didn't work. And then I had me type in my password, and then I did it wrong, apparently. And then I had to dual factor authenticate for weeks, literally almost a month. And I was so fed up with it because also my flights are in there because I use Capital One Travel. So every time I had to look at my flights or looking for updates or whatever, I had to go into the app. And for me to go in the app, I had to use dual factor. But the issue is when I'm traveling, my internet isn't that good until I set up my eSIM in that area. So I was struggling to get able to log in and look at my flights or figure out where I need to go or whatever I need to do. Such a pain in the butt. And I called Capital One and I was like, I am me. I've passed the dual factor authentication for weeks now. You've got to turn this off. And then they're like, yeah, we can't. And I was like, oh, like, what do you mean you can't? You can't turn it off? And they're like, yeah, it just like, I don't have the controls. And I was like, okay, well, can I speak to someone who does? This is really annoying. This is frustrating me. And I'm not one of those people that just call and complain, but it was really frustrating me because of all the travel and it was so difficult to access my account. And they're like, okay, yeah, no, I can't really help you. She was like, you are in that department that you're supposed to be with, and there is no way for any of us to turn this off. It's when the system says it's okay. So you've got to pass enough checks, and once the system deems that you aren't a threat, then we will unlock your account. But no employee has the ability to unlock it. It's a system, an algorithmic thing, and it's locked until it says otherwise. Which, one, is annoying. Two, it prevents people from jerking around the system and doing things they shouldn't be doing. So that may have been helpful for TD Bank. I get why Capital One does it, but I was like, in that moment, I was like, come on, are you kidding? Like, that's crazy. My account is permanent. Like, and when I was speaking to the person on the phone, they were like, yeah. And I was like, so how long can this be? And then they're like, forever. It's like, what? What are you talking about? She's like, I don't know. I mean, it could be forever. It could be next day. I'm not sure. And I was like, I've been doing it for almost a month. how long do I have to do it for? I've been logging in multiple times a day. And they're just like, yeah, I don't know. But yeah, it was a crazy statement when she's like, maybe forever. And I was like, if it's forever, I have to leave the bank. Like I can't dual factor authenticate every time I log in. But TD Bank could definitely use some increased controls because they didn't know about it. Quotations. Okay. So that's money laundering, and TD Bank got caught doing that. So this Corporate Transparency Act is supposed to help mitigate the risks of foreign governments interfering with the U.S. economy in malicious ways, and or preventing foreign governments and or criminal organizations and or individuals from laundering money with illegal activities. Okay, so beneficial ownership, switching topics, beneficial ownership is defined as a natural person who has control of a legal entity and or the legal organization's structure, and the actual person identified that runs the company. So basically the person who filed the legal entity and or the person who is in charge and or the person who has legal control or financial benefit. Sorry, I think I got a mosquito. It's biting me mid-episode. This is crazy. I have to defend my honor live against the audience. Oh my gosh. Okay. So for this BOI filing, what's required and is it extensive? Well, the demo on their website is about 5 minutes, so not really. You have to file your legal name, your date of birth, your residence address, and your business address, which could be the same, could be different. Then you need a unique identifying number related to a government issued identification, either your passport or your ID, whatever. And then you have to type that in. You go to the next page, type in some other stuff like what the business name is, and then it's like 3 pages, 10 questions each or something, 10 questions, 7 or so. And then you're good to go. And you'll get a response and then you're fine. So it's pretty simple. It's not overly burdensome. It's not difficult. There's not a lot involved in it. But the failure to comply, when I was reading but what they were trying to say is the penalty, I feel is quite bogus. And this reminds me when you go into these college like a dorm apartments and they have some kind of clause in their contract that said like if your rent's late one day, you're charged $800 a day until you comply. But I'm like, okay, the person didn't have any money to pay the rent, or maybe they did and just chose not to pay. But charging them additional $800 a day, one, I don't know if that holds up that well in an argument, and then two, like, what's going on? So it's a similar thing here. They're saying you have civil penalties of $500 a day per violation, or per day of violation. So if the filing is due January 1st and you take 20 days or 10 days, I mean, that's a lot of money. Like, I don't know who has that much money to just throw away. You know how you would have that much money if you were money laundering. If you're money laundering, no problem. But yeah, I can't just pay out $5,000, $10,000 just for some nonsense penalty that you're prescribing to me. Like, it just doesn't even sound reasonable. and criminal penalties can be up to 10,000. So this is a civil penalty, and then we have criminal penalties, and then they have up to 2 years in jail, not jail, but prison. Yeah, just a weird scenario where it's so easy to do, and then the penalty for not doing it is so severe. For what reason, I don't understand, but I'm not the government, so I don't know. But $500 a day and then up to $10,000 in criminal penalties is a lot. And I don't, Venture Step doesn't make any money. Like, it only has expenses. Like, it literally has zero revenue for now. Eventually, I mean, eventually it'll have revenue, but like it doesn't have any revenue. So, like, where are we getting this money from? Am I like, if the government hit me with like, oh, you're supposed to pay 10,000 of this and that, I would just say no. I don't know what else to tell them. Like, there's no way, man. Like, we're not doing that. We got to figure something out. Uncle Sam, because that's not going to work for me. So the Corporate Transparency Act, I covered that a little bit, where it was a bill that was passed years ago, and it was saying that, hey, whenever it passes and it comes law, they have up to 2 years to like actually require it. And it's coming down to the wire where January 1st is the month that you're supposed to start filing these things. And you're supposed to, if you filed, two things. If you created a new entity, you should file within 90 days. And if you're an existing entity, you have to file January 1st. And the general purpose of it is to help combat financial crime, and in a sense, national security. And there are some caveats to it. Like, some people are concerned that this might be something where, okay, it just starts with this and then it's that and then it slowly slips down, kind of like the gray ball thing, where it's like, okay, it started with geofencing, and then after geofencing it went to burner phones, and then after blocking burner phones it went to scraping people off the internet and finding those individuals and then keeping them from your app. So it could be a slippery slope, but it's not really affecting the general person. And I would say, in defense to the CTA, is one, businesses already know who you are. Like, if you used LegalZoom, if you used any of these things to help you file or create your legal entity, if you have a phone number, if you have an email, like if you have a bank account, I mean, the government knows who you are. Like, it's you're not off the grid. And if you think you are off the grid, you're delusional. If you have social media, I mean, if you gave me your number, and you don't repetitively change numbers all the time, if you gave me your number, you could literally look up like where you lived previously, who you are, what your name is, all this stuff. So for that to be the complaint, I think that's invalid. There is some valid complaints though. So, and we'll talk about them a little later. But you may be asking, who is exempt? Because there's 23 exemptions. Who is exempt? Well, the short and sweet is any exemption is mainly related to financial services. So if you are regulated by the SEC, then that would allow you to be exempt, pretty much. So if you're a securities reporting issuer, if you're a government authority, a bank, a credit union, an investment banker, an investment company, a venture capitalist, an accounting firm, a public entity, tax exempt entities, or large operating company, then you're exempt. Those are just some examples, not an exclusive list. I'm not going to read off all 23, but that is something for you to think about. So unless you are a licensed investor or accountant or a public entity, you need to file. So it's pretty much everyone besides the large financial services industry. And that makes sense because they have to have their own licenses and the government already knows who they are and they have to already report their transactions. So that makes sense. Legal challenges and the appeals. So there's been a couple legal challenges from various states, and the main one being Texas. So Texas has an appeal that, and I don't know the exact verbiage, but basically their legal case said that it was unconstitutional, and there's a preliminary injunction which stops the enforcement of a national preliminary injunction, which stops the enforcement of the BOI filing. And the DOJ had a appeal, which is still pending. So we don't necessarily know what's going to happen because depending on the results of the appeal, that may change. But then I think that the Texas court system could also make an appeal too. And then I think then the DOJ can make another appeal. And then it just keeps escalating up the court circuit. And then before you know it, you get to the Supreme Court. I don't know how long that stuff would take. I have no idea, but I'm sure it will take a while. So I was going to lean with, since it's easy and not a big deal, and I have no real fight for this, I'll just do it and carry on with my life. It seems like other great American citizens are fighting the good fight for you. So I was just going to get it out of the way, do it real quick, and then share it with you guys. And then you would make the decision on what you want to do. But yeah, definitely not something that is completely in stone for January 1st. They came out with a report today that they officially delayed the January 1st, but I don't know when this appeal is going to come out. And so the appeal might change their current standing on what to do. But right now it's optional to file. And if you optionally file, that's great. And it's encouraged from what the government is saying, of course. And if you don't want to, you're not required to until otherwise stated. So that's the Texas case. And so Texas deemed it was unconstitutional and they didn't like it. And there was a couple of things that they were talking about. So the states that appeal or file against the government, they were saying that one, it's a violation of Amendment 4 and the First Amendment and the 10th Amendment. The First Amendment, they're stating that it removes people's freedoms of speech and interaction, which I guess is kind of true. That one's a little broad for me. Maybe for a podcast, it makes sense. Like, I don't want the government to know what I'm talking about or know what I'm doing. I don't know. I don't know. That one's a stretch for me. Because if I'm talking about it and doing these things, or if I'm sharing it on the internet, I can't be completely anonymous in the first place. So anonymity is kind of thrown out. Like, there's always a digital footprint of the things that you're doing on the internet, even though you are bouncing your IP address and doing all these things not to be found, and you're anonymous. I mean, you could be found whenever. It's not that hard. I'm sure anyone with sophistication could do it. So that's where it kind of got lost on that. But apparently it infringes on freedom of association and speech. And I could see how potentially it could get down a path where like, okay, we're looking for certain groups that are associated with companies, and then we're targeting them. I could get that, so that makes sense. And then the Fourth Amendment is related to like unreasonable searches and seizures. And so they're saying, okay, like if I'm requiring personal identifiable information without suspicion, like this is an unreasonable search, which I don't feel is as competitive as the First Amendment. And then the one that makes the most sense is the 10th Amendment. So they're saying that the since this law regulates interstate commerce, it infringes on states' rights, and that falls under state jurisdiction. And so it's an overstep by the federal government, and they shouldn't be able to require these things because this is state jurisdiction and state commerce, which I think that's a more solid ground to stand on versus the other two, in my opinion. Once again, I'm not a lawyer. And then there's some other cases. So there is the National Small Business Association versus Yellen in Alabama. They ruled that the CTA is unconstitutional. And then the Texas Top Shop versus Garland. And this is December 2024, so this is very recent. They issued that nationwide preliminary injunction against the CTA. And then there was one other one, Firestone versus Janet Yellen. They upheld, and this was in Oregon, they upheld the CTA and they said it was constitutional, and they rejected both the 9th and the 10th Amendment challenges. So there's conflicting rulings, and there is the appeal from the DOJ. So the general sense is like, we don't know what's going to happen. Like we have no idea if it's going to be required January 1st. Probably not. We don't have that much longer. We have no idea if it's going to be required in the future, what to do. I just wanted to file it, get it over with, whatever. And I just found out about the recent announcement because it came out today that you're not required to file and it's optional. But I don't really see why it would be a big deal to file. Like companies already know that I own a business. They're sending me mail. They know my name. The government probably knows who I am too. So I don't think it's a secret. And I'm not doing anything wrong. So I don't really see the issue. So the impact on the business, could it be a financial burden and or a compliance burden? I don't think so. It's very simple. It would take you about 3 minutes if you already had your docs put together. So all you need is to know your name, your date of birth, and you need to have some scan of your passport or ID, and then you're good to go. So I don't think that there is a lead time required to prepare for this filing. If you're doing your other filings related to compliance or accounting, you should have all this information anyways. It's quite streamlined. I think the only thing that would make it more business friendly is if the link to submit the form worked. So you can't submit to the government at the moment or the Financial Crimes Network because enforcement network because their link doesn't work. So I can't help you there, and I couldn't file myself, so it's unfortunate. But we spoke about TD Bank's financial crimes. The Financial Crimes Enforcement Network got TD Bank. TD Bank charged approximately $3 billion. We talked about what businesses are exempt. Just as a reminder, unless you work in financial services or investments and raising capital, you need to file. So I would lean towards you need to file versus you don't need to file. And if you're asking the question, do you need to file? I would just say file because you're if you don't know, you don't know. And if you don't know, then you definitely need to file. Because if you're not doing those things, the select few, you need to file. We talked about some of the consequences that I think are way overboard. $500 a day per violation and up to $10,000 in penalties for criminal activity so there's civil and then criminal. There's criminals 10K, civil's 500 a day, and then up to 2 years in prison. Just bonkers, like way overboard. Talked about the Corporate Transparency Act, or CTA. We went over how you could do it as a business. That was the part where I was supposed to demo it. And I really felt that was going to make the episode. But you can't always get what you want. And I hope that you think this episode was interesting and practical. It potentially prepared you for some of the maybe legal changes that may or may not happen. Who knows when it comes to legality? People take forever when you can appeal the appeal, and the appeal is appealed to the appeal. So I hope that we get a solution. I'd rather know what to do than just be constantly waiting around. And what are your thoughts about TD Bank? What are your thoughts about CTA and the BOI filing? And how are you reacting to this as a business owner or someone looking to start their business? And just in general, like, what do you think about this BOI thing? Like, have you done it? Because I tried to do it. I watched the demo. I can memorize the pages because there's not that many. What do you think about the BOI filing? And tune in. Next episode, we are going to be talking about AI analyst agents. I'm excited to talk about it. Something I've been waiting to do for a while. I've got some materials to demo, and overall, very exciting stuff from Google, and something that they promised to roll out, I would say 6 months ago, summerish time. They said they'd be rolling out later this year, and they're one of the few companies that actually do what they're saying they're going to do when it comes to these promises. Apple has consistently promised something publicly, not done it. OpenAI has done the same thing. Google and their Gemini product, they have consistently said they're going to do something, and then they roll it out and it's public. And overall, very excited to demo that to you next episode. So please tune in. And of course, have a good day, a good night, good afternoon, wherever you are in this world. Thank you for listening. And I hope that you tune in next week. Bye.